The waves outside were calm that evening, brushing against the shore in soft, steady rhythms. Vivian Hartwell stood by the large window of her living room, holding a warm cup of tea. The orange glow of the sunset spilled across her beach house, painting the walls in gold. This house wasn't just bricks and wood to her. It was her heart. Her late husband had proposed to her here. Her parents had celebrated their 50th anniversary here. Every summer memory she had was tied to this place. She had spent the last 15 years restoring every beam, repainting every wall, making sure the place felt alive. And now, her daughter wanted to have dinner with her. Vivian checked her phone again. The message from her daughter, Isabella, still sat at the top. Dinner tonight. 7 p.m. Come to our place. Adrian's cooking. It was rare for Isabella to invite her without a reason. Usually there was a request involved, money for something, help with a problem, or advice she wouldn't follow. Vivian loved her daughter deeply, but over the years, their relationship had become complicated. Isabella had grown up in comfort, gone to good schools, and lived in beautiful homes. But after she married Adrian Grayson, things changed. Adrian was ambitious, always chasing deals, always talking about opportunities and big moves. He had a way of making everything sound like it was for the good of the family, but somehow the benefits always ended up in his pocket. Vivian had learned to keep her guard up around him. She got dressed in her soft blue sweater, the one Isabella used to say made her look too old-fashioned, and a simple pearl necklace. She didn't feel like impressing anyone tonight. Something about the invitation felt off. The drive to Isabella's house was quiet. The streets glowed under the streetlights, and by the time Vivian pulled into their driveway, the sky was already dark. Adrian's expensive black SUV was parked out front. Isabella greeted her at the door with a smile, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hi, Mom. Come in. Dinner's almost ready." Vivian stepped inside. The air smelled of roasted chicken and herbs, but underneath was a tension she couldn't ignore. Adrian appeared from the kitchen, holding a wine glass. "Vivian, so good to see you. We're celebrating tonight." Celebrating? That was the first red flag. They all sat down at the table. Adrian poured wine for himself and Isabella, while Vivian stuck to water. They made small talk. Isabella asked about the beach. Vivian mentioned the repairs she had just finished on the guest room ceiling. Adrian nodded politely, but didn't seem interested. Halfway through the meal, the atmosphere shifted. Adrian set down his fork, leaned back in his chair, and looked at Isabella. She gave him a small nod. Vivian's stomach tightened. She knew something was coming. Isabella cleared her throat. "Mom, we've been thinking a lot about the beach house. You don't really use it as much anymore, right?" Vivian frowned. "I live there, Isabella. It's my home." Adrian jumped in. "Of course, but think about it. It's valuable property just sitting there. You could sell it, invest the money, travel, enjoy life. And it just so happens, my friend Lucas is looking for a place exactly like that." Vivian's grip tightened on her fork. She stayed silent, letting them talk. Isabella smiled as if she was offering good news. "So, I sold it. To Lucas. The papers are already signed. It's not yours anymore." For a moment, Vivian felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. She stared at her daughter, trying to process what she had just heard. Her first instinct was to demand answers. To shout, to ask how her own child could make such a decision without even speaking to her. But she didn't. Years of dealing with Adrian's manipulations had taught her one thing. The person who stays calm always has the advantage. She set her fork down gently and took a sip of water. Then she looked at them both with the faintest smile. "If that's what you've decided, then I suppose it's done." Adrian's expression brightened, clearly interpreting her calmness as surrender. Isabella exhaled, relieved that her mother hadn't exploded. Inside, Vivian's mind was racing. She knew Lucas Rivers, Adrian's so-called friend. A man who had bought and flipped several old houses in shady deals, always aiming for quick profit. He didn't care about history, family, or memories. He saw houses as cash machines. But there was something else Lucas didn't know. Something Adrian didn't know. Something even Isabella had forgotten. Years ago, when Vivian had inherited the beach house, she had placed it into a special trust. The trust came with strict legal protections and full documentation of an old environmental hazard on part of the property. A hazard that made renovations nearly impossible without a long and expensive county clearance process. It was the very reason she had kept the house instead of selling it years ago. And now, that same reason could be her shield. She just needed to wait. The rest of the dinner passed in a strange mix of fake cheer and quiet tension. Adrian talked about how Lucas was thrilled, and how they could all celebrate together at the beach house once he moved in. Isabella laughed along, almost giddy, as if she'd just pulled off something clever. Vivian listened. She nodded at the right moments. She even smiled when they clinked glasses to new beginnings. But deep inside, she was already planning. When she left their house that night, the cool night air felt sharper than usual. She stood by her car for a moment, looking up at the stars. She thought of her husband, of the summers they'd spent at the beach, of the smell of the ocean drifting through the open windows. She wasn't going to lose it. Not like this. Not to Adrian. Not to Lucas. By the time she slid into the driver's seat and started the engine, Vivian Hartwell already knew exactly how this story would end. And it wouldn't be the way her daughter thought. The next morning, the sound of the waves was different. They still rolled in and out, but the wind carried a colder bite, like the sea knew a storm was waiting. Vivian stood on her porch, her robe pulled close, the salty air brushing against her face. She held her tea in both hands and stared at the horizon, letting herself feel the sting of what had happened the night before. Her daughter's words kept repeating in her head. It's not yours anymore. She had built her whole life around this place. Every floorboard and window carried a piece of her history. Losing it to a stranger, someone who didn't care about the memories, hurt far deeper than she'd expected. But Vivian wasn't someone who stayed hurt for long. She had learned over a lifetime that pain could be fuel if you knew how to use it. After a few minutes, she turned away from the sea and went back inside. The smell of old wood and fresh coffee grounds greeted her as she walked down the hall. She opened a cabinet in the living room and pulled out a large gray binder. This wasn't just any binder, it was her armor. Inside, page after page was neatly organized. The trust documents she'd created years ago when she inherited the house. County inspection records about a hazard discovered during early renovations. Insurance letters. Photographs of the repair work. Copies of the environmental hazard notice with the county's red seal. Vivian flipped to the section labeled Environmental Records. There it was, the report that had once made her hesitate to sell the property to anyone. The county had found a contamination issue under part of the house. It wasn't dangerous to live in, but any serious renovations would require a long, expensive cleanup. She had never gone through with it because it would have ruined the old charm of the place and drained her savings. She remembered the inspector's words from years ago. It's safe as it is, ma'am, but if anyone wants to tear into the structure, they'll have to fix it properly. No shortcuts. And no one can remove the tag without county clearance. Vivian smiled faintly. That little red tag, still hanging on the steel cabinet in the master bedroom, might now be the thing that saved her. She took a notepad and wrote a short checklist. Make 3 clean copies of all documents. Call the county to confirm records are still active. Photograph the hazard tag and storage cabinet. Keep everything visible on moving day. Stay calm, always. She underlined the last point twice. Vivian decided to go into town. First stop was the print shop. The young clerk ran her papers through the copier, the hum of the machine filling the small room. The thick white paper came out with sharp black ink, each page tabbed in red. She paid in cash, thanked the clerk, and slid the copies into a neat folder. Her next stop was the county building office. The lobby smelled faintly of old paper and cleaning supplies. Behind the counter, a woman with glasses peered up from her computer. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'd like to confirm a property file," Vivian said. "Harbor Drive, lot ending in -27. There should be a hazard record." The woman typed, scanning her screen. "Yes, it's here. Contamination under the master bedroom area. Tag in place. Remediation required before any renovations or structural changes. New owners inherit the responsibility." "Could I get a date stamp summary?" Vivian asked. "Of course." The clerk printed the sheet, stamped it, and handed it over. Vivian slid it carefully into her folder. "Thank you," she said, smiling politely. On her way back, Vivian stopped by the market for milk. She was reaching for a carton when a loud voice caught her attention. "Closing was a breeze," the man was saying. "People don't know what they're sitting on. You just move fast, make the deal, and flip it for double." Vivian turned slightly. Lucas Rivers was standing by the apples, chatting with the cashier like he was already the king of the neighborhood. She walked over. "Congratulations, Lucas," she said warmly. "I hear you'll be moving in soon." Lucas grinned, caught off guard. "That's right. This place will look completely different in a month. Knock down a few walls, open the view. It's going to be beautiful. Vivian nodded. The sea air is good for the soul. Her voice was light, her eyes calm. They exchanged a few more polite words before Vivian left, eucalyptus stems in her bag for the living room. Back at home, she walked slowly through each room. She removed personal photos from the shelves and wrapped them in tissue, placing them in a drawer. Not because she was giving up, but because she wanted them safe. She checked the master bedroom. The steel cabinet stood in the closet, the red hazard tag hanging exactly where it had always been. She ran a cloth over the metal, making sure the tag was clean and easy to read. That evening, her phone rang. Evelyn Cross, her attorney, was calling back. "I got your message, Vivian," Evelyn said. "The trust terms are still valid. Any owner accepts all liability for the hazard. If they skip the inspection, that's on them. You're fully protected." "Thank you, Evelyn," Vivian said. "Remember, don't argue with them. Let the paperwork do the talking." 2 days later, Adrian called. "Hey, just confirming, Lucas's movers will be there Friday at 9. We'll swing by for the keys and maybe grab lunch afterward. Keep it simple, all right? No lawyers or anything. We're all family." Vivian's voice was steady. "I'll be here. And I'll have my binder. It keeps me organized." Adrian chuckled, but there was a nervous edge to it. "Sure, Mom. See you then." The night before moving day, Vivian prepared everything. She photographed the cabinet, the tag, and the hazard notice. She printed an extra set of the photos and tucked them into her folder. She placed the binder on the dining table, open to the red-stamped county summary. In the morning, she made fresh coffee and set out white mugs. At 8:42, she saw the trucks turn onto her street. One for the movers, one sleek black SUV for Adrian and Isabella, and one shiny white pickup for Lucas. Vivian opened her front door and stood there as they approached. She wasn't defensive. She wasn't angry. She was ready. "Good morning," she said softly, just loud enough for them to hear. The real storm was about to start, and she was standing right in the center, perfectly still. The front door swung open, and the first thing Vivian saw was Adrian's grin. It was the kind of grin people wear when they think they've already won. Behind him, Isabella trailed in, her hair styled in soft waves, sunglasses perched on her head like she was arriving at a summer brunch rather than the home she'd just stolen from her mother. And then came Lucas Rivers. Tall, tanned, with a button-down shirt half unbuttoned to show off a gold chain. He stepped inside like he already owned the air in the room. His cologne was strong, sharp, the kind that announced itself before he even spoke. "Mornin', Vivian," Lucas said with a smirk. "Beautiful day for a move, huh?" Vivian smiled politely and gestured toward the kitchen. "Coffee's fresh. Mugs are on the counter." Lucas gave a little laugh. "I'll have one in a minute. Want to take a look around first, see where we're going to make the magic happen." The movers filed in behind them. 2 young men in navy shirts, a third carrying a clipboard. They nodded at Vivian politely, but they were already focused on their job, scanning the rooms, deciding where to start. Adrian clapped his hands once. "All right, let's get this show on the road. Lucas, you've got to see that master bedroom view. Sunset over the water. It's going to sell this place in a heartbeat once we open it up." Vivian stayed in her chair at the dining table, her binder open to the bright red hazard notice. She didn't touch it, didn't point to it, just let it sit there like a quiet guest at the table. From the kitchen, she could hear their voices drifting through the hallway as they moved toward the master bedroom. Lucas was already talking about tearing down that old closet and expanding the wall into the deck. And then it happened. A sharp, puzzled voice. Lucas? You're going to want to see this." Footsteps. The rustle of clothing as someone moved closer. Silence for 3 long seconds. And then Lucas's voice, lower, tighter. "What the hell is this?" Vivian stood, taking her time, and walked down the hallway. The movers were gathered at the master bedroom door, peering inside. Lucas was standing in front of the open closet, staring at the steel cabinet like it was a snake in the grass. The bright red tag hung perfectly flat against the metal, the county seal stamped clear at the bottom. Below that, in smaller print, any removal or alteration subject to county supervision. Clearance required before renovation or occupancy. One of the movers took a step back. "We're not touching that. Not without the right crew. That's asbestos-level stuff, man." Lucas's face was changing. The smugness was gone, replaced by a flicker of unease. "Vivian, what is this? Why wasn't I told about this?" Vivian stepped into the room, her hands folded loosely in front of her. That's the reason I never renovated. When I restored the house years ago, inspectors found contamination in the subfloor and support beams under this room. The county tagged it. The trust documents explain everything. Any owner is responsible for remediation before they can legally renovate or flip the property. Adrian jumped in, voice rising. Wait, hold on. You mean to tell me there's, what, some kind of toxic problem here? You never said anything about this. Vivian tilted her head slightly. No one asked. Isabella's voice broke in sharp. Mom, you can't just spring this on us. Vivian cut her off gently. I'm not springing anything. The documents have been on file with the county for years. Public record. The tag has been here since before you got married, Isabella. You've walked past this closet dozens of times. The movers were shifting uncomfortably now. One of them pulled out his phone. Hey boss, we're not licensed for hazardous removal. We're out until this is cleared. Lucas turned on Adrian. You didn't tell me about this. You said this place was ready to go. Adrian's jaw tightened. I didn't know. He jabbed a finger toward Vivian. She kept this quiet on purpose. Vivian's voice stayed calm. The trust transfer clause states that any new owner assumes full liability for remediation. That includes the cost, the county oversight fees, and the months, sometimes years, of clearance before you can legally move in or make structural changes. It's all in writing. Would you like to see the papers? She walked back to the dining table without waiting for an answer. The others followed, the tension thick enough to slow their steps. She sat, opened the binder to the hazard summary, and slid it across the table toward Lucas. Lucas scanned the first page, then the second. His face went pale. This could cost 6 figures. Easy. Vivian nodded once. That's why I kept the house. Sentimental value aside, it's not an easy sell. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, pacing. There's got to be a way around this. Can't we just remove it quietly? Vivian's eyes hardened. That would be illegal. And dangerous. Isabella finally spoke, her voice small now. So, what does this mean? Vivian met her daughter's eyes. It means Lucas now owns a property he can't legally renovate without paying for the cleanup. It means the beach house isn't the quick payday you all thought it was. And it means you didn't do your homework before making decisions about something that didn't belong to you. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the distant crash of waves against the shore. Then Lucas pushed the binder back toward Vivian, his jaw tight. This is gonna ruin me. Vivian's tone didn't change. I'm sorry to hear that. You can keep the house, of course, if you can afford it. Adrian swore under his breath and stormed toward the door. Isabella followed slowly, her face pale, her shoulders hunched. Lucas stayed behind for a moment, looking around the room like he was seeing it for the first time. Not as a gold mine, but as a trap. When he finally left, the movers were already packing up their straps and blankets. One of them gave Vivian a small nod, like he understood more than he was saying. Vivian closed the binder, carried it back to the hall cabinet, and slid it onto the shelf. She made herself another cup of coffee, the sound of the kettle whistling softly in the background. Outside, the trucks drove away. The street grew quiet again. The beach house stood exactly as it had that morning, steady, solid, untouched. But the game had changed completely. Vivian knew the fallout was just beginning, and she was ready for it. The day after the movers left in frustration, the air around the beach house was unusually still. No seagulls circling, no distant hum of boats, just the quiet weight of a place that had defended itself without a single nail moved. Vivian sat at her small dining table, sipping tea while flipping through a local newspaper. She wasn't reading, she was thinking. She knew Lucas wouldn't let this go easily. Men like him, and Adrian too, hated losing face even more than losing money. By mid-morning, her phone rang. She let it buzz twice before answering. Vivian Hartwell? A voice asked, clipped professional. Yes. This is Richard Cole, attorney for Mr. Lucas Rivers. He's asked me to contact you regarding the environmental notice on the Harbor Drive property. Vivian leaned back in her chair. Of course. And what is it you'd like to discuss, Mr. Cole? We believe this information should have been disclosed prior to sale. My client feels misled and wishes to negotiate a reversal of the transaction. Vivian's voice stayed calm. The information was public record. The tag has been on the property for over a decade. The purchase was arranged privately, without my direct participation. The trust's terms were clear. If you'd like, I can email you the clause numbers and county file references. A pause on the other end. I see. I'll confer with my client." When she hung up, she smiled faintly. She could almost picture Lucas in some glossy office, red-faced, pacing while his lawyer tried to make sense of a deal already set in stone. By Friday, the fallout had reached Isabella. She showed up at the beach house unannounced, the sound of her hurried knock breaking the quiet. Vivian opened the door to find her daughter standing there, hair messy, eyes rimmed red. "Mom, this is bad," Isabella said, stepping inside without waiting. "Lucas says the cleanup will cost more than the house is worth. Adrian is furious. They're saying it's my fault for not checking. Adrian keeps asking me why I didn't just tell you to sell it to someone else." Vivian poured her daughter a glass of water and set it on the counter. "And what do you think, Bella?" I don't know what to think," Isabella said, running her hands through her hair. "I thought I was doing something smart. Adrian made it sound like it was easy money. I thought we could all benefit. I didn't think." "That's the problem," Vivian said softly. "You didn't think. You didn't ask. You didn't care what it meant to me." Isabella's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. "So what happens now?" "Now," Vivian said. "Lucas decides if he wants to bleed money or walk away. Either way, the trust still holds the title until the remediation is done, which means the house stays in my hands." The following week, Vivian received a thick envelope in the mail from Lucas's lawyer. Inside was a formal notice. Lucas intended to forfeit his claim to the property due to undisclosed remediation obligations rendering the property commercially non-viable. It was legal speak for "I give up." The trust papers made it official. Ownership reverted back to Vivian without cost. She read the letter twice, then placed it neatly in her binder. Lucas's bankruptcy wasn't far behind. Word spread quickly in their small town. Whispers in the cafe, quiet conversations at the market. People liked to gossip about the fall of someone who had bragged too loudly. Adrian's business ventures took a hit too. Lucas had been a silent partner in one of his deals, and without his investment, the whole project stalled. Isabella stopped calling for a while. Vivian didn't chase her. She knew her daughter needed time to face the mirror without anyone holding it up. Spring arrived slowly that year, bringing softer winds and brighter skies. One morning, Vivian unlocked the front door of the beach house and stood in the entryway, breathing in the familiar scent of sea salt and sun-warmed wood. She had spent the last few weeks restoring the rooms to how she liked them. Photos back in their frames, books in neat rows, curtains washed and fluttering in the breeze. The steel cabinet still stood in the master closet, the red tag untouched. She had no intention of removing it. The hazard was real, and she respected the truth of it. But now it was her truth again, not a weapon in anyone else's hands. Nora, her neighbor, stopped by with fresh bread and a smile. "Looks like the house won the fight," she said. Vivian laughed. "No, Nora. The house just stood still. The rest of them ran into it too fast." One evening, just as the sun began to dip, Isabella came by. This time, she knocked softly and waited. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Of course," Vivian said, stepping aside. They sat in the living room, the low orange light casting shadows across the floor. Isabella fidgeted with her bracelet before speaking. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said quietly. "For the house. For everything. Adrian, he's not happy I'm here. But I had to say it." Vivian studied her daughter's face. "Why are you really here, Bella?" "Because I didn't just lose the house. I lost your trust. And I want it back." Vivian was silent for a long moment. "Trust is like a house," she said finally. "It takes years to build, and you can lose it in one bad storm. But if you want to rebuild, you start with one good brick at a time." Isabella nodded, tears finally slipping free. They didn't hug right away. They just sat side by side, listening to the steady rhythm of the ocean. That night, after Isabella left, Vivian stood at the window watching the waves roll in. The beach house glowed softly in the moonlight, a quiet sentinel against greed, haste, and betrayal. She had kept it. She had kept herself. And though the trust papers sat neatly in their binder, she knew the real safeguard had been her own patience. She whispered into the dark, as if her late husband could hear. "It's ours. It always will be." And with that, she closed the curtains, turned off the light, and let the house rest.